and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. My name is Cassidy Cash. This week we have a mountain of artwork that has exploded behind me, so you're liable to see paintbrushes and canvases flying everywhere back there. But that also means that there's new swag available on the website. You can download the latest piece of artwork in the episode for this week at CassidyCash.com/episode 104. You do have to sign up for our email newsletter to get that free artwork, but subscribers get artwork like that every month, so be sure to check that out and enjoy the view. This week, we're taking a look at one of the most ordinary domestic items I could think of for the life of William Shakespeare, and it's how did people let Shakespeare know they had arrived at his house? In Stratford-upon-Avon, there is Shakespeare's birthplace, and this is one of the houses that William Shakespeare lived in himself, and on the door, when you go in, it just occurred to me, like, how did people who visited Shakespeare let him know they were there? Did they knock on the door? Did they just yell for him? Was there a doorbell? The first electric doorbell didn't actually get invented until the 1800s, but it was still called a doorbell. And why did we not call it a buzzer or some other word for a loud noise? Why did we keep using the phrase doorbell into perpetuity for all subsequent entrances into the home and notification noises for these devices? We called them doorbells on into today. That's what we call them. And so it led me to wonder, was there ever a bell attached to a door for this notification? And could Shakespeare have been one of these people? Well, let's explore the elaborate history of the doorbell this week when we ask, did Shakespeare have a doorbell? This question actually proves to be much more complicated than I had expected. It's going to require a huge amount of time and research to actually find the advent of hanging a bell on a door for the purpose of notifying someone. So this episode is going to leave some gaps in terms of covering everything because it's a wide swath of information, but I will share with you what I was able to find out. Now, as I mentioned, Joseph Henry was the first person to invent an electric doorbell. He did this in 1831, and he was also, interestingly, the Smithsonian Institute's first secretary, which is fascinating to me. But apparently calling it a doorbell came from the fact that in the 1800s, bells being attached to someone's domicile was hugely popular. So in the 1800s, this is definitely something that people did. They had a bell next to their door, and you could ring it to let them know that you were there. Now, whether or not it existed for William Shakespeare turns out to be something of a question mark, and it's an idea that I could not find proof of, but I also couldn't find anyone that said it didn't happen either. So it's kind of a question mark. I'm really not sure, but here's some interesting facts. They did have a need within William Shakespeare's lifetime to notify someone when you arrived at the house. And the most popular way to notify someone that you were there was door knockers. Now, door knockers date back to China, and we have examples from ancient Rome and some in the 1530s in Italy. Like so many things during the life of William Shakespeare, there were ordinary ones that's just a piece of metal strapped to a door and you bang it and it makes noise. But then there's also hugely artistic ones that feature this just ornate, intricate artwork. And one popular one for the life of William Shakespeare include carving them into the shape of a lion. Now, the lion itself has the reputation of being a fierce protector, and it makes sense to put that on the front of your door. But it was also the symbol of England. So using the lion was also very patriotic. So it was hugely popular to have them carved this way if you were of a high enough status that you could afford such a thing. My personal favorite example of the door knocker comes not from the life of William Shakespeare, but in fact from Charles Dickens, as my personal favorite is the door knocker in A Muppet's Christmas Carol. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely go check out the Marley door knocker. It's well worth your time. But that is way after Shakespeare, and while it's always cool, it does represent a reality from Shakespeare's lifetime, and that's that the door knocker was the primary way to let people know you were at the door. There's a great example of a 16th century door knocker at the Met Museum. Here's a picture of that. And bells in general had a huge place in the life of William Shakespeare. So while there is some question mark about whether or not they attached them to the door for the purpose of notifying people, they were used for a lot of different other notifications. Church bells were used to signify the hour of the day. Bells were also used to signal when someone had died. This was sometimes called a death knell, with the word knell also representing bells or the ringing of bells. Shakespeare twice mentions bells as a signaling or honoring of death. In The Tempest, he wrote, "See nymphs honoring ring his knell. Hark, now I hear them, ding dong bell." There is an almost identical rhyme in Merchant of Venice. In both cases, the knell means the sound made by a bell rung slowly, especially for a death or a funeral. Interesting, William Shakespeare is thought to have been responsible for the ringing of the bell when his brother died, as no one else in his family would have had the means or the opportunity to make that occur. The ringing of bells over the dead was also thought to ward off evil spirits. So in addition to being honoring of the person's passing and acknowledging that they had died, it was thought that there was some time in between when the person died and the spirit going either to heaven or hell or on to the afterlife in that way. And the ringing of the bells was supposed to protect the spirit as it traveled to that destination and scare off any evil spirits that might try to attack it. Bells being associated with the warding off of evil spirits is one reason a lot of churches have church bells. Bells were also associated with warmth and light, and in addition to warding off bad things, they also had the power to attract good things. And so, as you might expect, bells play a prominent role in Yuletide and Christmas celebrations. These connections continue into the 21st century with songs like Jingle Bells, and we think of horses pulling sleighs that have bells on them, and bells were a prominent feature of Shakespeare's Christmas celebrations as well. Another point in history where bells were popular for William Shakespeare was with the Morris dances. These dances were part of the holiday celebration on the 7th Sunday after the Feast of Pentecost. It was right around the beginning of summer, and it was just celebrating the warmth and fertility and joy of summertime, and the bells were used to signify all of those things with the Morris dances. Interestingly, even though I wasn't able to find a domestic use for bells on doors specifically, they were used in farms for notifying different occasions on the farm there. So they were used not only in churches, but also at other various buildings. And so I started looking at where did the bells come from, and there were a lot of bell foundries. This is the name of a factory whose job it was to produce the various bells. There's one very famous bell foundry called the Whitechapel Bell Foundry that was started in 1570. It is still there and functioning today, and it was around when William Shakespeare was living. Bells play a prominent role in history in general, as the book of Exodus in the Bible notes that small gold bells were worn as ornaments on the hem of the high priest's robes in Jerusalem. Ancient Greeks had handbells that were used in their camps and garrisons, as well as like notification by the sentinels. You see that as kind of a trope in movies where you've got somebody walking around ringing the bell, announcing the time. That has actual historical foundations. So what I was able to find out about bells in general is that they were hugely popular for the life of William Shakespeare. They were used to notify people of the time of the day. You see that show up in several of Shakespeare's plays. They were also used to mark the passing of the dead. That use of bells also shows up in Shakespeare's plays. I was not able myself, in time for this episode, to find an example of where bells would have been used on the door of someone's home to notify of like an entrance or exit. I found plenty of evidence to suggest that that is something I would expect to find, because there was a lot of places where bells were used to ward off evil spirits, and the warding off of evil spirits any way that you could was something that was extremely popular throughout the life of William Shakespeare. So I would not be surprised at all to find that that was a use for bells during William Shakespeare's lifetime. But like I said, for today, I wasn't able to find that. So if you know of an example of where bells were used to ward off evil spirits by either hanging them on or next to the entrance to a home or business during the years of 1564 to 1616, please let me know about it in the comments below. I will tell you just lastly that when you look at the images of Shakespeare's birthplace in Stratford-upon-Avon and you zoom in on the front door, there's no door knocker. There is also no bell. It's just the door. So it seems that while they were around and they were popular, whether or not you always had them in the way that we think of them for homes today was obviously not universal, since Shakespeare's house doesn't seem to have one. There's a ton more to explore about this topic, but I hope this gets you started. As always, there's more history and links to where you can learn more in the show notes for today's episode. Find the link for that below this video. That's it for this week. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.